Ryan, what's on your radar?
Well, there's a new video making the rounds on the right that shows a man in Georgia dropping off ballots in a ballot box. And it's part of a continuing effort to show that Donald Trump did actually have the election stolen from him, or to show that there's at least some evidence that there was some voter fraud. Now, the general reaction from the mainstream media to these types of developments has largely been to ignore them. After all, the election is over. Dozens of challenges in federal and state courts were rejected, many rejected by Trump-appointed judges, and January 6th failed to overturn the election, as Trump said recently was his plan. But polls also show that a growing number of Americans are convinced that there was a good amount of fraud in the last election, and the numbers are headed in the wrong direction. Right after the ransacking of the Capitol by Trump's mob, 74% of Republicans said they opposed that effort. Now that number is down to 61%. Among Democrats, it's also dropped from 94 down to 86%. Now, a year ago, 44% of people said there had been no election fraud, while that number is now down to 31%. Among Democrats, 3/4 used to say there was no fraud, but that's down to half now. Now, interestingly, among Republicans, slightly fewer, from 72% down to 66%, think that enough fraud occurred to change the results of the election. Still, 2/3 of Republicans thinking the election was stolen is insanely high. And the way these numbers are moving shows that people are changing their minds. And since people are changing their minds, that means, to me at least, it's not useful to completely ignore new developments as they come up. So this video was made public by a right-wing organization called True the Vote, and purports to show a so-called ballot harvester delivering ballots. Okay, so ballot harvesting is the name for a process that is actually quite legal in some states, in which somebody can go door to door and pick up sealed ballots and drop them off. Now, Georgia in 2020 didn't allow paid ballot harvesters, but there was nothing illegal about taking a friend or family's ballot and dropping it off. This election, that's been banned. So if this guy did in 2022 what he's doing in that video, or what it looks like he's doing in that video, it would be illegal. Republicans in the state have also made it much harder to get an absentee ballot, requiring a copy of your driver's license be mailed in before getting one. They also moved the boxes indoors, which heavily limits when people can drop off ballots. So, on the question of this clip, I asked some people who work as organizers in Georgia, and they pointed out a few things about it. First, since it wasn't illegal to pick up your friend's ballots and drop it off, it's hard to know if he's being paid. Now, the way he fans them out and photographs them strongly suggests that could be the case, but we don't know. If he was being paid, that would be breaking the law. But it wouldn't mean the votes themselves aren't valid, and that's the second point, and it's a crucial one. If those were fake ballots, they'd be rejected when they came in. Only properly filled out and signed ballots that match the details of a registered voter at that address would be counted. So at the very most, what you might possibly have here is somebody who was illegally paid to make it a tiny bit easier for somebody to vote by doing the kind of thing that is actually totally legal in other states. So last month, based on information provided by True the Vote, the Georgia Secretary of State said he'd be launching an investigation into these claims, with the group saying they had many more examples of this type of harvesting. The Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, the Republican who clashed with Trump after the election, if you remember, said the group claims that more than 200 people dropped off some 5,000 ballots this way. But he also made the point that the ballots themselves were still legal. He said, quote, "Ballot harvesting, those are still lawful ballots. They've just been handled fraudulently. Many states actually allow ballot harvesting. We outlawed it because we think that the only person that should touch the ballot is the voter and the election worker, and there shouldn't be any people and intermediaries in between," unquote. So does this video show something illegal? It might not. There's an investigation underway, and we'll hopefully get the results soon. Does it mean anybody voted who wasn't supposed to vote? No. This video doesn't mean that.
Yeah, this is the frustrating thing with these voter, irregular voting kind of election fraud narrative. It's a big country. Inevitably, there are genuine cases of voter fraud out there. Ballots are counted wrong. It happens.
Right.
But we're talking about elections that are decided by millions of votes. So it doesn't matter. Now,
No,
in the one
Georgia,
election in 2000, the year 2000 in Florida, you can make it there. This is very close, and we all, that was that was nuts. But outside of that, it's never close enough. And then, like you point out here, a lot of things that people, oh, look at this, what's going on with that? And then, 95% of the time it has a benign explanation, and 4% it's like but it doesn't matter. Then like every now and then it's like, yeah, that was wrong.
And Georgia was very close. Arizona was like 10,000 votes.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to pile together enough votes so they can say, like, look, if these would have swung this way,
right,
then that swings this state, and then.
But often they're saying, oh yeah, what about this giant pile of votes? Well, 49% of those votes are votes for the other guy anyway. So it's not like it's not always like we're missing this huge pile of votes. But those weren't all votes for your people.
Right.
In any place, they're split roughly evenly.
And underneath the outrage around this video, I think, is an interesting point about what we think of when we think of elections and think of election integrity. Because to me, what's most important is that everyone who is legally able to vote has the opportunity to vote and has their vote counted accurately. And so to me, if those were real ballots from real voters, then they ought to be counted. Now, if some organizations broke the rules by paying people to go door to door, then no, you can't break the rules. You got to follow the rules, and those organizations should be investigated and punished if they find that out. Just like we have rules that you're supposed to be 150 yards or 150 feet or whatever away from the voting location. Whenever you go to the polls, they have those lines where you can't electioneer inside those lines.
Right.
This is not Vietnam, as they say. There are rules. So that's a rule. If somebody breaks that rule, there should be some type of consequence for breaking that rule. But that doesn't mean that the entire election was fraudulent. The most important thing is that everybody who has the right to vote should be able to vote. And I don't see as much concern about that as I do about fears that some people who they didn't want to vote may have voted. Like that's, I think, what's kind of the unspoken thing behind that video. It's like, what are those votes? Who are those? Rather than, no, those votes are going to be checked and counted and compared to the voting registry. And if they're legit, then they'll count. And if not, they won't.
An issue, this is like with everything else, better analytics makes it easier to contemplate ways to game the system, right? We know if you hold the election, if you hold an election at an off time, or a school, you say it's a local election, say it's an election to more funding for the school or whatever, and you hold it at a weird time. That's what the teachers union wants it held at a weird time because they will send all their members to vote. Nobody else votes.
Tuesday at noon at the school.
Right. If it's held on election day, well, then they're much more likely to lose because all the taxpayers are going to the polls to vote to cast their votes for Trump or Biden or whoever, and they'll look, oh, what is this? The school needs more funding again? I don't think so. So it's there's things like that you can do, and so both sides do that to an extent, but but because of the way the last election went, the right is just hugely bought in at this moment in time to the idea that it was fraudulent election stuff, and I wish conservative media should be doing more to push back on that because it's self-defeating. Because I mean, Trump does this, right? He's saying, we can't, don't bother voting until we secure this, lock this system down. We need to shut down voting for Republicans until we figure out what's going on. What are you talking about, man? Don't vote, the Trump strategy.
Yeah.
Like, Jesus.
See how that works out. Actually, we saw how that worked out.
We saw how it worked out,
in the Georgia Senate elections.
We saw how it worked out. Joe Biden is able to appoint a replacement to the Supreme Court because of that. There will be just enough votes, 50 plus Kamala Harris, to appoint to replace Stephen Breyer with whomever Biden wants. And if they had not lost if the Republicans had not lost both those Senate races, we would just have 8 people on the Supreme Court for the foreseeable future because they would not replace that justice, I think.
Yeah, I think that's probably right.
Well, anyway, our rising panel will join us next, so stay with us.